I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong, and it was not loud at all. It was a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight touching the kitchen table, and my coffee had already gone cold. I was sitting alone like I had done for most of my life, but that day felt different somehow. Something inside me shifted, like a door opening slowly after being closed for decades. I looked around my house, everything in its place, everything exactly how I wanted it, and yet something felt missing. It was not a sudden pain, not a dramatic heartbreak, just a deep and steady emptiness that I could not ignore anymore. I had always told myself I was strong, independent, and happy alone, and for many years I believed it completely. But at 65, truth has a way of finding you, even if you have spent a lifetime avoiding it. Maybe you have felt this too, that quiet moment when everything looks fine, but inside something feels incomplete. That morning, I finally asked myself a question I had avoided for 35 years. Why did I really stay single for so long? And the answer was not what I expected at all. I was not always this way, you know. In my 20s, I believed in love just like everyone else around me. I dreamed of a small house, a warm kitchen, and someone waiting for me at the end of the day. I had relationships, a few serious ones, and one that I thought would last forever. His name was Daniel, and he had this calm way of speaking that made everything feel safe. We met at a bookstore of all places, both reaching for the same novel at the same time. It felt like something out of a movie, and for a while, everything was beautiful. We would talk for hours, laugh over small things, and make plans that felt so real. But even then, there was something inside me that held back, something quiet but strong. When he talked about the future, about marriage, about building a life together, I would smile. But inside, I felt fear. It was not fear of him, not fear of love, but something deeper that I could not understand back then. I remember the night he asked me if I could see a future with him, and I froze. Not on the outside, I smiled and said I needed time, but inside, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I could not step into. He was patient, kind, and willing to wait, but I kept creating distance without realizing it. I would cancel plans, avoid serious conversations, and tell myself I just needed space. Looking back now, I see it clearly, but at that time I thought I was protecting myself. Eventually, he grew tired of waiting for a version of me that never fully showed up. The day he left, he did not yell or blame me. He just looked at me with quiet sadness and said, "You never really let me in." Those words stayed with me, but I pushed them away, just like I pushed everything else that felt too close. After Daniel, there were others, but none of them lasted long. I became very good at keeping things light, keeping things distant, and avoiding anything that felt too real. I told myself I was choosing freedom, choosing independence, choosing a life without complications. And for many years it worked. I built a career, traveled when I wanted, decorated my home exactly the way I liked, and never had to compromise. People would ask why I never married, and I would smile and say, I just had not met the right person. It was easier than explaining something I did not even understand myself. Over time, the question came less often, and eventually, People just accepted that I was the woman who stayed single. It became part of my identity, something I wore without thinking too deeply about it. There were moments, though, small ones, that slipped through the cracks of my carefully controlled life. Weddings where I smiled and clapped, but felt a strange heaviness in my chest. Holidays where I sat at a table surrounded by others, but still felt alone in a way I could not explain. Evenings when the house was too quiet and I would turn on the television just to hear another voice. I ignored those moments, told myself they were normal, that everyone feels lonely sometimes. But those small feelings, they do not disappear. They wait patiently, growing stronger over time. In my 40s, I had another chance, or at least I think I did. His name was Michael, and he was different from anyone I had known before. He was not overly romantic or dramatic, but he was steady, present, and honest in a way that made me feel seen. He did not rush me, did not push me, and for a while I thought maybe this time would be different. We spent quiet evenings together, cooking, talking, sharing pieces of our lives slowly. It felt safe, and for a moment, I believed I could finally open up. But when he started talking about moving in together, about building something real, that same old feeling returned. That quiet fear, that invisible wall, it came back stronger than ever. I began to pull away again, not in obvious ways, but in small, careful steps. I stopped sharing my thoughts, avoided deeper conversations, and kept parts of myself hidden. He noticed, of course he did. People who care always notice. One evening he sat across from me and asked gently, "Why do you keep holding back?" I did not have an answer, not a real one. I told him I just needed time, but the truth was, I did not know how to let someone truly see me. Eventually he left too, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. And once again I told myself it was for the best, that I was simply not meant for that kind of life. Years passed, and I became more comfortable in my solitude, or at least I thought I did. I created routines, filled my days with work, hobbies, and small pleasures that kept me busy. From the outside, my life looked peaceful, even admirable. A strong, independent woman who lived life on her own terms. But independence can sometimes become a shield, something we hide behind so we do not have to face what is really inside us. And I did not realize that I was hiding, not just from others, but from myself. That Sunday morning at 65, sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, I finally stopped running from the truth. It did not come all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a memory returning after a long time. I realized that it was never about not meeting the right person. It was never about bad timing or unlucky circumstances. The truth was much harder to accept. I was afraid, not of love itself, but of being seen completely, of being known deeply, and of possibly being rejected for who I truly was. So I stayed in control, stayed guarded, and stayed alone, because it felt safer than taking that risk. And as I sat there, holding my cold coffee, I felt something I had avoided for most of my life: regret. Not loud or overwhelming, but quiet and heavy, settling gently in my chest. I thought about all the moments I had stepped away, all the chances I had slowly let go, and all the walls I had built so carefully. Maybe you have done this too. built walls so strong that even you forget how to take them down. That morning I understood something important, but also painful. Staying single was not just a choice I made, it was a way I protected myself from something I never learned how to face. I wish I could say that realization changed everything instantly, but life does not work that way. Understanding the truth is one thing. Learning how to live with it is another. And as I sat there in the quiet, I began to wonder something I had not allowed myself to think before. Was it too late to change? Was it too late to open up, to try again, to let someone in? Or had I spent so many years protecting myself that I had forgotten how to live any other way? I sat there for a long time after that question crossed my mind, letting it settle inside me slowly. The house felt quieter than usual, as if even the walls were waiting for an answer I did not have yet. I kept asking myself the same thing, over and over again, wondering if a life can really change after so many years of being the same. At 65, most people believe their story is already written, that the important chapters are behind them. And for most of my life I believed that too, without even questioning it. But that morning felt different, like something inside me refused to accept that it was too late. Maybe you have had a moment like that, when a small thought refuses to leave your mind. It stays there, quietly asking you to look at your life in a way you never have before. And that is exactly what happened to me that day, sitting alone with my untouched coffee. I started thinking about all the reasons I gave myself for staying the same. I told myself I was too old to start over, too used to my own ways, too comfortable in my routines. I said things like, "This is just who I am," as if that was something fixed and unchangeable. But deep down, I knew those were just softer versions of the same fear I had carried for years. Fear has a way of changing its voice as we grow older, becoming quieter but more convincing. In my 20s, it sounded like uncertainty. In my 40s, it sounded like caution. And now, at 65, it sounded like acceptance. But it was still the same fear, just dressed differently. That afternoon, I did something I had not done in a very long time. I opened an old wooden box I kept in my closet, the one filled with letters, photographs, and small pieces of my past. I had not touched it in years, maybe decades, because it reminded me of parts of myself I chose to forget. My hands moved slowly, almost carefully, as if I was afraid of what I might find inside. The first thing I saw was a photograph of me and Daniel, standing outside that little bookstore where we first met. We were smiling, looking so young, so open, like nothing in the world could hurt us. I stared at that picture for a long time, noticing something I had missed before. It was not just happiness in my face, it was trust, a kind of openness I had not felt in years. I placed the photo aside and picked up a letter, one that Daniel had written to me during our relationship. His handwriting was neat, familiar, almost comforting. As I read his words, I felt something shift inside me again. He wrote about how much he cared for me, how he wanted to build a life together, and how he sometimes felt like I was holding a part of myself back. At the time, I remember feeling misunderstood, even a little annoyed by his words. But now, reading it years later, I saw the truth in what he was trying to say. He was not asking for too much. He was asking for something real, and I was the one who could not give it. Then I found something that surprised me. It was a small note, written in my own handwriting, something I must have written in my early 30s. It said, "Do not get too close, it never ends well." I do not remember writing it, but I know exactly where it came from. That belief had been quietly guiding my choices for years, shaping my decisions without me even realizing it. It was not about the people I met, it was about the story I was telling myself. And that story kept me safe, but it also kept me alone. As the afternoon turned into evening, I sat on the floor surrounded by pieces of my past, feeling something I had avoided for a long time. Not just regret, but understanding. For the first time, I was not blaming circumstances, timing, or other people. I was seeing my own patterns clearly, maybe for the first time in my life. And strangely, that did not make me feel worse. It made me feel something unexpected. It made me feel a small sense of control, like maybe, just maybe, I was not as stuck as I thought I was. The next few days were different in a way I could not fully explain. Nothing around me changed. My home was the same, my routines were the same, but something inside me felt softer. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The quiet was still there, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt empty. The independence I was so proud of started to feel a little lonely, and that truth was uncomfortable, but also necessary, because for the first time, I was not hiding from it. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window, watching people walk by outside. Couples holding hands, friends laughing, even strangers passing each other with small smiles. It was such a simple thing, but it made me realize how disconnected I had become from that part of life. Not because I could not have it, but because I had slowly stepped away from it over the years. And as I watched them, I asked myself something new. Not why did I stay single, but what do I want now? That question felt unfamiliar, almost strange, because I had spent so many years focusing on what I did not want. I did not want to get hurt. I did not want to lose control. I did not want to feel vulnerable. But I had never really asked myself what I truly wanted beyond those fears. And the answer, when it came, was simple but powerful. I wanted connection. Not something perfect, not something dramatic, just something real. A conversation that goes deeper than small talk. A presence that fills the silence in a meaningful way. But wanting something and knowing how to reach for it are two very different things. I realized that even though I understood my past better now, I did not know how to act differently in the present. Change is not just about awareness. It is about doing something you have never done before, and that can be the hardest part. I thought about meeting new people, about opening up, about trying again, and I felt that familiar fear returning. But this time, it did not feel as powerful as before. It was still there, but it no longer controlled me completely. A few days later, something small but important happened. I was at the grocery store, standing in line, when a man behind me made a simple comment about the long wait. Normally, I would smile politely and keep the conversation short, ending it as quickly as possible. But this time, I responded differently. I made a small joke, something light, and for a moment we both laughed. It was nothing significant, just a brief exchange between two strangers. But for me, it felt like a tiny step outside of the life I had been living for so long. Maybe it sounds small, But change does not always begin with big dramatic actions. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as staying in a conversation a little longer than you usually would. As I walked home with my groceries, I realized that for the first time in years, I was not avoiding connection. I was allowing it, even in the smallest way. And that felt like the beginning of something, even if I did not know exactly what. That night, as I sat in my living room, the silence felt different again. It was still there, but it did not feel as heavy as before. It felt like space, something that could be filled, something that was no longer permanent. And I understood something important. It was not about finding someone right away. It was about changing the way I showed up in my own life. For so many years, I had closed myself off without even realizing it. Now I was beginning to open, slowly, carefully, but genuinely. I do not know where this path will lead me, and for the first time, I am okay with that uncertainty. Life does not always give clear answers, but it gives moments, choices, and small opportunities to do things differently. And maybe that is enough. Maybe you do not need to have everything figured out to begin again. Maybe you just need to take one step, however small it may seem. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about something I had not felt in a long time. Not regret, not fear, but a quiet sense of possibility. And at 65, that feeling is more powerful than I ever expected. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, and for a moment I did not recognize the feeling inside me. It was not excitement exactly, and it was not fear either. It was something softer, like a quiet awareness that something in my life had shifted. I moved through my routine slowly, making my coffee, opening the curtains, letting the light fill the room. But this time I was paying attention, really noticing how I felt in each small moment. For years my days had blended together, comfortable but predictable, safe but distant. Now there was a small sense of curiosity, like I was seeing my own life from a different angle. I kept thinking about that simple conversation at the grocery store, how something so small could feel so meaningful. It made me realize how long it had been since I allowed myself to be present with someone, even in the simplest way. I started to notice how often I had closed doors without even thinking about it. A short reply instead of a real conversation, a polite smile instead of genuine interest, a quick exit instead of staying just a little longer. These were not big decisions, but over time, they had shaped the life I was living. And now, I could see them clearly. A few days later, I made another small choice, one that felt bigger than it should have. There was a community center not far from my home, a place I had passed many times but never entered. They have a small notice outside about a weekly gathering. Nothing formal, just people meeting to talk, share stories, and spend time together. I had seen that sign for years and always walked past it without a second thought. But that day, I stopped. I stood there for a moment, reading the words again, feeling that familiar hesitation rise inside me. It would have been easy to keep walking, to tell myself it was not necessary, that I was fine on my own. But something inside me pushed gently, reminding me of the question I had been asking myself. What do I want now? So I went in. The room was simple, nothing special. just a few chairs arranged in a circle and a small table with coffee and snacks. There were people already there, some talking quietly, others sitting alone, waiting. For a moment I felt out of place, like I had stepped into a world I had avoided for too long. I almost turned around, almost walked right back out the door. But then someone looked at me and smiled, a simple, welcoming smile, and I found myself staying. I took a seat, my hands resting in my lap, my heart beating a little faster than usual. As the gathering began, people started sharing small pieces of their lives. Nothing dramatic, just stories about their days, their families, their memories. I listened more than I spoke, but for the first time in a long time, I felt connected to something outside of myself. There was something comforting about hearing others speak honestly, without trying to impress or hide. It reminded me that everyone carries something, even if it is not always visible. At one point, it was my turn to speak. I hesitated, unsure of what to say, unsure of how much to share. Old habits do not disappear overnight. But then, I remembered something important. If I wanted something different, I had to do something different. So I spoke, slowly, carefully, choosing simple words. I did not tell my whole story, not yet, but I said enough. I said that I had spent many years alone, that I was trying to understand why, and that I was learning how to open up again. It was not perfect, but it was real. When I finished, there was no judgment, no uncomfortable silence, just quiet understanding, a few nods, and a gentle smile from someone across the room. And in that moment, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt seen, not completely, not deeply, but enough to make a difference. And surprisingly, that did not feel as scary as I had always imagined. After the gathering ended, people stayed for a while, talking in small groups, sharing little moments of connection. I stayed too, even though part of me wanted to leave, to return to the comfort of my familiar solitude. But I resisted that urge, choosing instead to remain just a little longer. I spoke with a woman named Carol, who told me about her own journey after losing her husband. There was a calm strength in her voice, the kind that comes from living through something difficult and finding a way forward. Listening to her, I realized that life does not end when something changes. Sometimes it begins again in a different way. On my way home, I felt something I had not expected, not just hope, but a quiet sense of courage. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not erase my fears, but it gave me something to hold on to. For the first time, I was not just understanding my past, I was actively changing my present, even in small ways, and those small changes were starting to feel important. Days turned into weeks, and I kept going back to that gathering. Each time, it became a little easier to walk through the door, a little easier to speak, a little easier to stay. I did not transform overnight. I was still careful, still reserved in many ways, but I was no longer completely closed. I began to notice something else too. The more I allowed myself to connect with others, the less heavy my own thoughts felt. It was as if sharing even a small part of myself made the weight inside me lighter.